There's a running joke in the League of Legends community that 9 times out of 10, the real finals is in the semifinals. At least that was prior to the last 2 years where finals has been incredible best of 5 series. T1 is no exception to that rule whatsoever. You go back to arguably the most memorable best of 5 in League of Legends history, and Rocks Tigers versus T1 semifinals, Madison Square Garden 2016. 2017, they overcome these hurdles of everybody saying that T1 doesn't look good, and clearly they didn't as they went on to lose finals. Faker is solo carrying this series and dragging T1 to finals. The thing is that everything flipped on its head after 2017. After the collapse in finals, they finally don't win that title, and then it seems like the narrative kind of changes. You jump forward to 2019, you have arguably the 2 most memorable semifinals of that year, both with G2, both with T1 losing both of them. And I'm trying to remember at the time. I want to say G2 was favored going into that series, but I'm not 100% certain because there was a lot of bias of just G2 at home. They were coming off of the win of MSI, so people did believe to a certain extent. I don't think they would have been that big of favorites even if they were, but regardless, this was the Faker handshaking moment. You jump to 2021, their semifinals appearance against Damwon Kia, who ended up losing in the finals, but T1 lost in a 5-game series here, setting the precedent that, damn, okay, they're kind of choking before the big one. Last year's Worlds, obviously, they go on to win their semifinal but lose the final. That's the pretty glaring exception of this. That might have been the best chance that T1 will ever get at an easy path to finals. And then you look at this year's MSI, where they face off against JDG in technically the semifinal and the winner's final due to double elimination, and they fall in one of the best of 5s of the year, which sets up now the rematch in the semifinals of Worlds this year. And let's be very clear, T1 are underdogs coming into the series, and anybody that says anything otherwise just hasn't paid attention to the history of this team over the last few years in major games like this, as well as this tournament. It would be a disservice to JDG and to T1 to flip the narrative and say that T1 are favored in this series. JDG clearly are. They are the better team fighting team, and bot lane is going to determine almost everything in this series. This truly is a Faker versus Goliath situation where I can't remember a time where T1 was this big of a quote underdog going into a series. I know it was close, but actually stop and look back and say, when was the last time that you remember T1 staring down the barrel of a gun like this? I can't think of it. Now, granted, I've only been following League since 2018. Everything else prior to that, I've learned about the history, but I wasn't there in the moment, so the narratives are a little bit more lost on me. For the longest time, Faker was always Goliath on the David versus Goliath scale. You would never, ever bet against him in Worlds. 2017 more or less changed that. Since that moment, he hasn't had the international success that he once did, and hey, that's perfectly fine, but it's amazing how much this parallels another superstar with almost the exact same reputation in a different game, or in this case, a different sport. This is Eldrick Tiger Woods. He is the most famous golfer of all time, and he was a prodigy from the time he was young, making appearances on TV and just being a phenomenal amateur golfer, collegiate golfer, and then very quickly broke into the professional scene and won a major earlier on in his career than most, but not only followed that one major win up, but would go on to win many, many more, and is still to this day considered the most dominant player in the sport of golf ever. Even if he doesn't have the majors to top the likes of Jack Nicklaus, and to compare this to League of Legends, that would be somebody else having more Worlds titles, but Faker being way more dominant in a shorter period of time. Tiger Woods is one of the undisputed GOATs of the sport. He single-handedly revitalized golf and brought it to the mainstream in a way that no other athlete was able to do during their time, in the same way that Faker has brought League of Legends into a whole new limelight and LoL esports into a golden era. Now, what was the key to Tiger's success, other than obviously just good iron play? I'm not getting into the mechanics of the game itself. It was actually Saturdays. So golf is set up in a way where you play 4 rounds of golf to determine the winner. You play Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Saturday is known as moving day, where people jockey themselves on the leaderboard to get into that final pairing on Sunday so that everybody is chasing you. Tiger was never the greatest Sunday player. He didn't always play the best in what we would consider finals in League of Legends, but he always made people around him play worse and crumble under the pressure. The reason why Saturdays were so big for him is because he would launch himself up the standings every time. If he wasn't already in the lead, he would put himself in a lead and then be able to protect it. And he never gave that lead away in the finals. That final round, for the longest time, from the time he started in, I believe, 1997 to 2008, he did not lose if he had the lead or a share of the lead going into the final day. Everything changed, though, in 2009, whenever he lost the PGA Championship, the final major of the year, to Y.E. Yang, a guy that nobody at all expected to beat him. This dude came out of nowhere and broke Tiger's streak and broke Tiger's mental. Those that aren't familiar, after this, Tiger ended up having a massive public scandal where it came out that he was having multiple affairs, he was living celebrity life to the fullest, to say the least, and injuries also caught up with him. Not only did his ex-wife hit him in the face with a 5-iron as he was driving away from a public dispute and ran into a fire hydrant, but bodily issues that he'd been developing over the years finally started to catch up with him. He trained with the Navy SEALs and the Marines because his dad was in the military and he always kind of wanted to follow after his dad's footsteps, but was too good at golf and never did. But those injuries and the mental issues all caught up to him. From 2009 on, he just couldn't play the same. He would go on to win more tournaments and more regular events, but he would never really come close to another major win. There were times where he would flirt with it, but there was never this unanimous, like, oh, Tiger's going to win this one. He quickly went from Goliath to David when it came to the majors, and as the years went on, we were worried that he would never be able to do it again, but he somehow found a way. You see, in addition to never losing a final round lead, he'd also never come back from behind on the final day of a major. It, for whatever reason, eluded Tiger. He just couldn't do it. Mostly because on Sundays, his play style was hey, I'm going to put this on the middle of the green and force you to make a move. And anytime he forced people to make a move, they would crumble. It wasn't really conducive to massive come-from-behind victories when you would need to put up 4 or 5 strokes to be able to win the tournament. That was always what Saturdays were for him. Kind of like Faker, as we alluded to earlier, I don't know if Faker's ever been this kind of underdog before. I don't think T1 has ever had this kind of run where like they need to pull off the impossible, what it seems like, to be able to do this. The thing is that if Tiger can do it, so can T1. All of this set the stage for the 2019 Masters, and if you've never seen it, please go watch it. It is one of the most amazing moments in all of sports history, where Tiger Woods not only finally wins his first major, almost 10 years after throwing away his lead at the PGA Championship to Y.E. Yang, but he also does it by finally overcoming that one thing that he'd never been able to do, which was come from behind to win a major. It was the most cold killer performance on the back nine of Augusta that I think we've ever seen. There were obviously bigger moments and bigger plays, but like you look at the stretch of golf that he played from 11 all the way through 18, and it was just unbelievable how he was able to just remain steady the entire time and find a way through it and do the thing that people thought was impossible. Faker now steps into that exact same scenario. Faker is playing that underdog role, which he has not had to play to this level of depth pretty much ever, and the other times that he's had that chance, he has not been able to do anything with it. Eventually, he has to break that streak, right? And tonight feels like the night that that's finally going to happen. I've made my prediction clear on Twitter and TikTok, but I do think T1 does take this series over JDG. It just feels like magic is in the air, and it might seem irrational. Believe me, my dad told me that Tiger would never win a major ever again, dating back to 2015, and 4 years later, I'm crying as Tiger's winning, and he's like, I can't believe he finally did it. And yeah, I do think Faker is finally going to do it. We'll talk about finals if it comes to that time, but for now, get ready for one of the best of 5 series that we will probably ever see in terms of the storylines and hopefully the gameplay. But it's going to be a wild night tonight, and I hope you all enjoy.